about applying for federal treaty protection funds. I haven't submitted it yet, but it's available to us. We have a very good contact there. Chris Allery, who's Director of Anishinaabe Legal Services right now, his sister is like second in command at Department of Justice, Office of Tribal Rights. And so she's been very accessible to us. And so all I need to do is put the request in paper. We just had a call recently. That's my report on that. And it's going to segue into some other items on the agenda. What we're going to focus on is the environmental protection part. And one of the other resolutions is going to request that the MCT sponsor an environmental impact statement on behalf of the whole area, the whole Minnesota-Chippewa Tribe area. I believe that it would really help us. After going through the Public Utilities Commission process for Sandpiper, I believe this will greatly help us with this.
Especially the line too, we're trying to get open now, right?
Right.
Just at the beginning right now. Yep. And that will help us if the tribe has control over the environmental impact statement. That will help us a lot be able to determine the outcome of what Enbridge wants. Yeah. And as we get further down the agenda on these issues, we can talk more about the pipeline proceedings. It's all related though to this EIS.
All right. Next, we look at the status of funding requests for 1855 TAs to the RBCs.
I know I sent out a request in July. I've heard money may be made available at Leech Lake and White Earth, but no one's shown me the money.
Yeah.
The check is in the mail.
That's what I've heard. Process
We'll get
printed
that, I mean,
somewhere.
Yeah.
They were
Pro bono.
favorably received.
That's what I believe too.
No, actually, Leech Lake, on the 6th of this month, in a RBC meeting, passed Mike Auger's gaming request to do a $10,000 donation to the 55. What we're waiting for is some secretary treasurer or something like that to sign the meeting minutes, and then Mr. Auger can process the check.
Well, hopefully we'll find that secretary treasurer and talk to him about it.
He or she may have already signed them, and they just haven't flowed down to the appropriate staff.
Okay.
Writer's already been approved.
Yeah, it's already been approved. Check hasn't been cut yet, but it's been approved.
Okay.
In the mail.
All right, well, and that may be,
You should check your mailbox today.
yeah. It won't be in my mailbox.
It might be a little late, but you know.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, I don't know if we're expecting any other contributions from Mille Lacs that I've heard. So at this point, I think we have enough to work with, I guess. And that's what I
So
would say.
Mille Lacs isn't gonna match this,
Well,
you think, or do we?
I can't tell, I was hoping that Niebuhr Machaw would be here today. It
Okay.
sounds like the governing body, the legislative body, has an interest in all that, but I don't know if it's gone to both sides or if it has to go to both sides or how it works out, but when they talked about it, they wanted some other information, and I haven't heard anything back from them, so.
Okay.
I'd like to think that they would contribute, and maybe after they see that others have, maybe they will, but I just haven't seen the second one happen. So,
Well, I did ask their secretary treasurer at the TEC meeting, and she was receptive, and maybe that was before your conversations where they were gonna discuss it more.
it might have even been after. So, are you going through East Lake on the way home?
I don't know what my plans are yet.
Okay. All right.
So, Mr. Chairman, we're on old business number 3.
Okay. You're running the meeting though, right?
You're here now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, don't take a bite out of that sandwich, Archie.
Don't eat, huh?
Trying to be talking, so you got all kinds of time to eat.
Well, thanks for starting it, Punky. We're on item number 3, and it's just discussion. And you and Frank and Joe already gave a report on that, huh?
Yes.
Number 3.
Well, a little bit, yeah.
Which one?
If I could mention something else on 1
We
and
talked about
2.
the federal
Yeah, we
complaint,
need to do
yeah.
3 of them. Go ahead, Dale.
So if I could mention something else on 1 and 2. The Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe has some, what are they called, lobbyists. And on behalf of the 55, I met with our lobbyists, and they're ready, if they're not already lobbying whoever they contact to support the 55. And they asked that if Leech Lake and White Earth RBCs were to pass resolutions asking the Secretary of Interior to do a opinion on the United States being the other party, that might help their efforts.
Being the other party.
Joe, there was some grants out there, remember we were talking about we might be able to use them to 55, Joe, looking?
Yeah, I did. We've been talking with people from the Sierra Club and the Natural Resources Defense Council. We actually had a meeting with them last week. And I think that it's favorable, for financing, not so much for the 1855 complaint, but for the larger environmental impact statement that I just mentioned, which will spill over into this 1855 also. We attended a meeting last week that was up at Sandy Lake, and Sierra Club, Natural Resources Defense Council, other national environmental groups were there. Mille Lacs was there, Frank and I were there, other people that are participating with the pipeline stuff through the Public Utilities Commission were there. And everybody was sharing all of their experiences nationwide. These groups operate nationwide, and they recognize, that our success over on that Sandpiper was a good thing, and that we have to be able to keep that momentum going. Pete?
Yeah, just a question. One of the things that's come out of this Dakota pipeline struggle is that I think the national environmental groups have been confronted, maybe for the first time, with how important Native American claims are to their environmental struggles. And I think it woke them up. It's the way it seems to me. I don't know if that was your experience or not when you were meeting with them.
It was loud and clear.
Yeah.
I mean, they want to support, they see the partnership, between the non-Indian environmental groups and native tribes is gonna be instrumental in getting this thing solved.
Yeah, 'cause that was the point of that article I wrote like 5 years ago or so, that, that the treaty rights actually, are a powerful tool that the environmental movement can use, but they weren't at that time. And now it seems like maybe that's starting to happen.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
And-
And we learned that firsthand, with the 1855 in the Public Utilities Commission proceedings, even though they're not judicially affirmed.
Right, and that was, and so I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And in terms of this broader environmental approach in Minnesota, while it's not the 1855 per se, that analysis relating back to the 1825 and the 1826, providing the hunting and fishing rights for all of northern Minnesota, that 1855 confirms. it seems to me provides a foundation for hunting and fishing rights across the whole northern swath of Minnesota. That for all of the Chippewa and all of those territories, that maybe we shouldn't lose sight of, and that maybe the Sierra Club and the others need to pay some close attention to, because while that hasn't been also confirmed officially, that's going to be part of the lawsuit for the 1855, because it's going to say that those treaty rights aren't taken away by the 1855 and pre-exist the 1837, pre-exist the 1842, pre-exist the 1855, and are the foundation for everything, because they granted sovereignty.
We understand that, Pete?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm hoping, I know that you guys understand that, but I'm hoping that these environmentalists are understanding that.
No, they see it loud and clear. They
Right.
couldn't fully articulate the details of it, but they understood the concept.
Cool.
That's why they're at the table.
Right, right. And not to jump around too much, but I mean, with the resolutions that are in the new business, you know, if we can get what Joe was starting to talk about with the MCTY across our ceded territories in Minnesota EIS with the federal government, they are interested in helping finance that. They think they can come up with some of the money, because that's sometimes the hardest part, is finding the money. And so they see the value in us being, if we can get that being a requirement, that that's their best tool. And they know that we can't just afford to go to that. Right, so yeah, they're actually seeing the value in dollars and cents, I think, for investment purposes.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question about the use of property rights. Now, can those be used to counter these trespass claims? Like what's happening over in Sandy Rock? I mean, a lot of them are getting thrown in jail because of trespassing. Now, could we use the use of property right in 1855 to counter any future trespass claims? In case something, should happen with line 3?
Yeah, I don't know enough about which ones those are, but if they're trespassing on private property, those are the hardest ones to work at under use of fructry if you're not actually trying to hunt and fish, and that's all there is. There's a couple of layers that you have to kind of go through to see what's going on. I mean, use of fructry rights and protest aren't exactly interchangeable,
Well,
I'm not sure.
but it's also used there for protesting to protect.
Right, right, that's the whole
wildlife.
trick, that's the whole trick, is to
Water.
do it under the protection part of it, right,
Mhm.
right. Hey, bud. So that is what we're essentially trying to do, is use our use of corrective rights as a defense mechanism. We're hoping that other people can learn to use that as well. You know, at that same meeting that we were at, I still don't know, I haven't talked to any of the attorneys who are out there in the Dakotas, so I don't know really what they're arguing. And the one person that I talked to at that meeting was talking about the 1851 and 1867 treaties or something for the Lakota. So they're not even going back to the 25 that they're a party to with us, which is where we start. So I don't think that they really understand how we're doing what we're doing, because I think it would benefit them just as much. But they're not looking at things the same way, and we haven't had any contact with their attorneys. Otherwise, I think what you're talking about is what we're trying to do here, it would work there to a large degree. Right.
I can add to that. I've sent some of our stuff out to the, not attorneys, but some people that are involved out there in the Dakotas, so they can understand it and use, weave that into their positions out there.
There are some treaties from that same time period, like 1855, that did not protect use of fructuary rights with the Chippewa. There's one in St. Mary's in Michigan, for example. So you've got to start with the language of the actual treaty that covers the land area that you're talking about.
Right.
The treaties with the Lakota may be different than the treaties that we're talking about. Right? So you can't just say treaties are treaties are treaties. You gotta say, what is the treaty in the land area that we're talking about, and build it up from there.
Right, because each treaty is basically different.
Each treaty is basically different, right? And the way the courts have interpreted it, they said the usufructuary rights are strongest on public land. And then the right to exercise usufructuary rights on public land are strongest there. When you get into areas where it's land that was sold and people bought the land and it's private land, that's where you get into more difficult conflicts, because then you got the rights of the private property owner and versus the usufructuary rights, and there you got permission issues and trespass issues that become more difficult, and all those issues haven't been sorted out yet with the treaties that exist in Minnesota. So we're gonna have to sort all those issues out for the actual treaties that we're talking about. But first, we're gonna have to get usufructuary property rights recognized in all the public lands. And we're not there yet with the 1855. And we've gotta get the off-reservation rights recognized for the 1855, same way they are for the 1854 now. So the first thing to do is to get to the same place with the 1855, that the state is recognized in the 1854. That's step one. And then how far beyond that, we'll have to see.
Well, we do gotta start with our rice thing, right?
Dale's got a question or comment here.
Yeah, I'm just reading the agenda. Maybe this is something that we should consider putting on the agenda for the next meeting. And I'm glad Professor Erlander's here. I'm glad that Kevin stepped in, and Kevin might be a little bit more familiar about the next subject, which is, maybe I should just back up. My wife has been in Boston all week. She's been at the United Nations Indigenous rights training as an attorney for that, and I know Kevin's been going on behalf of Fond du Lac over here for a couple of years, where the U.S. Justice Department seems to be trying to guide that, at least the delegations from Minnesota. I think under the United Nations, and Professor Erlander might be more, knowledgeable about this subject than I can ever be. But our indigenous rights are a lot more, than what our treaties say they are. And we should maybe create a subcommittee or something, or a think tank, to not lose sight of the connections to the United Nations indigenous rights, and possibly get some dialogue started with that, because when we get mired down into the federal government telling us what our inherent indigenous property rights are, we're still taking from their hand. And it's somewhere along the line, we should be defining what our individual rights, because I guess at the training, the U.S. Justice Department came out and tried to forcefully say that our indigenous rights are held collectively. And, I just don't know how the United States can forcibly say that, because we can all be individuals and still have our rights, but without the individuals, there is no collective rights. Hope I'm saying that people can understand. I think it's like Dan Morris's voting right thing, that even though it's a collective right, the individual exercises that casting of a vote. So they are, so just something I think that needs to be added to what we're talking about, and even in the South Dakota, North Dakota pipeline issues is if we focus on our indigenous rights along with these usufructuary property rights in the treaties, I think we can probably plan to go a lot further.
So you're talking about any kind of identification of reserved rights, indigenous rights, or anything?
Or the rights of occupancy, yeah, you know, I would think that, you know, how can we weigh private property when it's interfering with protecting our indigenous rights? You know, I would say that in the 55, we haven't negotiated anything on property rights or anything like have happened already in the 54 and 37. Will the US government send in the troops? Well, probably.
It seemed to be what that Governor Dalrymple was calling it,
Right.
cavalry there.
Private cavalry.
So I just would hope we can add that to any future agenda. I think that's really, really important. No, I'm just, you know.
Well, first of all, the idea that there's international law and there are rights beyond what are in the US Constitution is an idea that's been recognized in the 20th and 21st century. And the United Nations speaks to that. The US Constitution is an 18th century document based on 18th century thinking. And the Supreme Court is notorious for not looking at more modern ideas of rights, like right to a job, right to health care, you know, right to eat, you know. So the idea that there are rights beyond what are in the US Constitution is, in my opinion, absolutely the right thing. It's correct. And one of the ideas of original intention with Scalia is that only so far, no farther. And it's, you know, the only rights that you have are those that we're going to give you. Right? So by definition, it's a wise idea to go further and to think farther than what's in the constitutional argument. It's not the end-all be-all. So, you know, the idea of figuring out what the UN is saying about indigenous rights makes sense to me. However, if we're going to file a lawsuit and make an argument that's going to win based on legal precedent that exists now, those ideas aren't in the law yet. It's the old ideas that are in the law. But there's a lot that can be done with those ideas to win now. And we can also make arguments about what the law should be and isn't yet. And that's not a bad thing to do. It's a good thing to do. But the point is that the current system is based on capitalist property concepts and white man's concepts of property. And even with those concepts, the Indians can win and turn their own system against them. So it's not like those are polar opposite ideas. I don't think they are. I think it's use their own system against them and then show what the shortcomings are in their own system and how they don't deal with the reality of human existence on the earth. Because there's no right to clean air, there's no right to clean water, there's no right to humane existence in the way the US Constitution is thought about now. But if it doesn't have those ideas in it, we're not going to survive. And so that's got to be changed. So I agree with the basic concept, you know, that you had. But if we're going to file a lawsuit that's going to win on what the law is now, we're going to have to take advantage of those ideas and turn them to our advantage.
Well, I'm not saying add it to any lawsuit.
Yeah, well, well, that's, you know, I just want to separate the two because, and combine the two, recognize we're talking about, you know, we're not, I didn't suggest that that you said that, but I want to make clear to the people in the room that we've got no differences on that. We're engaged in two different things. And those are both necessary things to do. But the concepts of property that exist in the Constitution don't include the kinds of ideas that are going to save us in the future, which is what you're suggesting. And those kinds of ideas is what we need to survive into the future, not the old ideas of property. I agree with you.
Well, I think I was more, and maybe I need to be clarified, is that we create that committee to always keep in mind
Yeah.
that we have indigenous rights.
Yeah.
And, how we use them, tomorrow or the following week, month, or years, is that we gotta say it.
Yeah.